Whatever you're building, build it alongside what you're already doing. If you have a job, great, keep your job and build that thing. Continue to work on that thing, because you make really bad decisions when that thing needs to pay the bills right now, or that thing needs to change what you're doing right now. So I would say whatever you're doing, build it along what you're already doing, because you'll make better decisions. You'll be able to look at it 6 months from now, 6 weeks from now, 6 years from now, rather than just being in the now. Because when somebody's thinking about, okay, I got to pay an electric bill this week, it's different than worrying about, okay, so I want to do these things in my business correctly so that it makes 10 times the amount of money I could be pulling out of it this week. So to me, that's the thing you should take a look at, is how can I do what I'm doing or what I want to do alongside what I'm already doing? Because you're going to be able to support it and you're going to be able to make better decisions.
The first and best victory is to conquer self. Welcome to the Conqueror approach, a journey of self-mastery. To cultivate our mind, body, spirit, financial literacy, and allow our light to shine upon the world. Brought to you by me, your host, U.S. Navy submarine veteran and entrepreneur, Musa Mikkel. Let's conquer. Welcome to the Conqueror approach. Today I have Jeremy Slate. He is the founder of Create Your Own Life podcast, which studies the highest performers in the world. In iTunes, he is ranked number 1 in the business category and ranked number 78 in the top 100. He studied the literature at Oxford University and is a former champion powerlifter turned entrepreneur. He was named the number 1 podcast to listen to by Inc. Magazine in 2019, as well as named as one of the top influencers by Forbes magazine. Thank you, Jeremy, for joining me on the Conqueror approach today.
Hey, brother, thank you so much for having me. I'm stoked to get a chance to chat and hang out. As I said, like, this is a new space that I just got running for this being the first interview I'm doing it on. So I'm still like kind of making sure all the camera angles are right, all the mic angles are right. So I appreciate this being the maiden voyage for the new studio.
Hey, no worries, man. No worries. Don't worry about the little details, because what's important is your message and what you have to share, because you are a very successful entrepreneur. You have a cool story, champion powerlifter. I know that is relentless for anyone who does powerlifting.
I pulled an 80,000-pound army tank back in 2014 to raise money for the Wounded Warrior Project. That was a good time, man.
Yeah, that sounds pretty hard. I wouldn't recommend that.
Yeah, it's an understatement.
Well, thank you for doing that. I'm a veteran, so I
appreciate your service, man.
To the Wounded Warriors, because that's awesome cause that you're doing that for. But I did want to talk about that a little bit, man. Being a champion powerlifter, now you're an entrepreneur helping people in media and doing all kinds of things, interviewing some of the most elite people that walk around the world. Tell me a little about your journey, man, about from being a powerlifter into entrepreneur, and how maybe being a powerlifter set you up for success to become an entrepreneur.
Interestingly enough, like I had no idea I was going to be doing any of this. Like my background, I don't know if this is going to surprise you, but I have a master's in ancient history. So as weird as that may sound, I have a double major in undergrad in Catholic theology and Torah. Not Jewish, but I just thought it was interesting. So like I've always been somebody that's been interested in knowledge, and I've always been interested in that learning and that research. And I really didn't have any idea what I wanted to do when I got out of school. So it seemed like the next step was, well, I'm really good at learning. How do I do more of that? So I decided I want to be a teacher, which is kind of the opposite end of the pole. And that really didn't go very well for me. I ended up actually teaching in a small Catholic high school, which had just gotten rid of number grades. And that was wild, because kids figured out, okay, I can fail everything. If I pass one thing with a 70, I will pass for the year. So it was like pandemonium gone wild. And I was very, very quickly burnt out about 2 years into that. And in 2012, my mom ended up having a really bad stroke. And it made me look at a lot of what I was doing. And I'm like, well, shit, man. Like, what do I want to... Can I swear on your show?
Sure. Be you, man.
Okay, cool. Shit, man. Like what am I gonna... It's the Jersey thing. Like, what am I going to do? Like, I spent years and years and years and, thousands of dollars, like, doing this, and I don't want to do this. Like, this isn't what I want to do. So my mom had a stroke, and it really just made me look at everything. And I ended up actually quitting my job on a whim, going full time in network marketing, which I didn't know what that was. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to be a millionaire in like 3 days. It's going to be great. That did not happen. I very quickly burned through a lot of money, alienated a lot of friends, and made a little bit of money. So that was kind of my first entrepreneurial real thing that I got into. And I tried everything, man. I sold life insurance door to door, which was interesting. And I was actually good at that, but I hated the conversations about, so like, you're going to die, right? And you love your family. So, and you wouldn't want anything to happen to them, would you? I feel like a Cuomo. So like, it really wasn't like a great situation for me, like, personally, even though I was making money. So I went from there to then selling products on Amazon, but I messed up and sent a promo code out to too many people and gave away all my products for free. And I was very quickly out of business. So I had been listening to podcasts since, gosh, like 2009. I had a college professor introduce me to a show called The No Agenda Show. And they literally just make fun of the news for 3 hours twice a week. It's great. And I was always like, okay, well, I can do this podcast thing. So I did it as a hobby the first time, and it was horrible. We had like 100 listens in 3 months. Wasn't very good. Sound quality was horrible. There were no guests. It was just me being life coachy, which I am the furthest thing from. So it didn't feel real. And it didn't really go well. So it wasn't until 2015 I finally launched Create Your Own Life. And I reached out to the top 100 people I most admired, and we had 10,000 listens in our first 30 days. And that's kind of what's led us to everything else I'm doing.
That's awesome, man. And I get it. I get it. Starting this podcast, there's a lot of things that can discourage someone, and not just podcasting, but any entrepreneurial venture someone starts. There's going to be challenges, and the one thing about your story is you didn't just like figure it all out what you wanted to do. You didn't just graduate college and like, all right, this is it. This is what I'm going to do. Like you went through a lot of experiences. Like you got degrees and things that you probably were interested in. However, that's not.
But they're not very usable. They were interesting, but they're like, what do you do with this? Do you hang out at a museum? Like, what do you do?
Yeah, and you realize that, and you still made a shift. You went into entrepreneurship, network marketing, made a shift that didn't work. You sold life insurance, made a shift that wasn't it, and then you landed somewhere where you feel like this is it.
Yeah. You know what's interesting though, and I don't think we're taught in society to look at it like this. That each one of those things that I did and didn't go well for me, I learned a skill that I still use to this day from that. You know what I mean? Like, and I learned discipline. I learned, selling. I learned different things. Like you've probably seen this in your military background, right? Like, you learn discipline. You learn different things that you take to every single thing you do because you're changed by each one of those experiences. So like, yeah, they didn't work out, but I've learned a lot from them.
Absolutely. And that's a crucial way to look at things when it comes to growing in success, because everything, I believe, every single experience leads you to learn something if you're paying attention and looking for the lesson.
Most people aren't though. They're too passive at life. You know what I mean? That rather than seeing like, okay, well, what can I do with this? What part of this is my next phase? They try to make everything perfect and they never take off rather than seeing what they can learn from something.
Right. Like you got a degree in, well, it was ancient history.
Ancient history. I took 12 years of Latin, man. And I wrote a thesis about how the Roman emperor convinced people he was God and the tools he did to do it. So like, it's interesting, but like, what are you going to do with that in the world, man?
Yeah, true. But then those years have taught you important things also, right?
Yes,
Whether it was
absolutely.
discipline and continuing education, because that's not easy. A thesis is not easy. So it's like, and philosophy, knowledge, history, like you probably learned a lot from history that you can apply to modern day. So it's like there are things that were useful, and you're not, beating yourself up for wasting years.
Oh no, absolutely. Like I can research like nobody's business because I've learned how to, think that way. I've learned how to use the internet better. I've learned how to do a lot of different things. So like for me, and actually like the biggest thing is teaching you a thought process, how to think things through and how to research things, which that's an invaluable skill you can take to anything.
Yeah. And that's huge for what you do now. And
yes,
some things like that people might glaze over. However, like that skill has helped you have an extremely successful podcast in a relatively short period of time.
Oh, and what's interesting about that too is I found that like I was trying to do like more episodes and things like that because I wanted to get traffic and get views. But because of that, the amount of time that was going into it was taking out the part I really like, which is what we just talked about, the research, the learning, and things like that. And I wasn't having as good and as informed conversations. And that's one of the reasons that now we're down to one interview show a week and then just one, solo show a week. So it's like at the same time, you have to keep your eye on what your strengths are because, you can get off of that.
Right. And then that's also a form, I feel, of just doing too much without refining and like mastering the craft.
Yes.
Which is like something that you probably learned from a lot of the great people that you talking to like Hall of Fame athletes and just extraordinary people. They've spent a lot of time just working on mastering their skill set,
Mm-hmm.
And the hours of practice shows up when you do go do what you do.
It's interesting because like I've looked at people that are like really good interviewers, like, what did Larry King do? What did Oprah do? Because there's specific things they do that make them better at what they do. The first question isn't the important question for them. It's the follow-ups that come after it. And at the same time, like having that trained in is really helpful too, because I'll tell you what, man, when I get some interviews I'm really excited about, I get nervous. And the fact that I have that background and that practice and things like that helps me to get through that and still have a great conversation. Like back in May, I had Brian Dawkins on, who was the Hall of Famer for the Philadelphia Eagles. Like for a second, I had to be in my head like, holy shit, that's Brian Dawkins sitting in front of me. So like you have to like kind of, if you don't have your practice on that, if you haven't worked on your craft, you haven't done things like that, you might clam up in a situation like that rather than have a really great conversation that's beneficial to the people listening to you.
Absolutely, man. And there's a saying, I don't know if I'll butcher this, but you don't rise to your level of skill. You rise to your highest level of preparation.
Mm-hmm.
So or something like that. I probably
there's also a thing called the Peter principle too, that people rise to one level above what their like highest level of achievement is, meaning like they go to a level a lot of times that they're mediocre at. So you have to at the same time make sure you have the self-awareness to understand when you're not producing and when you're not doing things well too.
Yeah, and that's huge, man. When you see, let's say Brian Dawkins, like this guy's a legend, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you got nervous, which explainable. Yeah. I don't think any podcaster wouldn't be nervous who knows who Brian Dawkins is. I'd be nervous. What did you tell yourself? What was the conversation like in your head to get out of that and just navigate through it?
So I'm not really a conversation in my head guy. I'm more of a, like, you do your preparation, I've worked hard on my skills so I can fall back on those. But at the same time, I'm somebody that actually just kind of pulls out of it, meaning I go for a walk. I do something. I know, like, if I do something that's, action, as much as if it's even sweeping the floor, like that gets your mind off of what you're thinking about because you're doing something. So I find that for me, I try to find a way to like do something or work with something because it'll get my attention off that thing, so I won't be as stressed. Like that's one thing I've really worked on a lot.
Yeah, that's a good skill. That's a good point because when you are in fear and just being fearful of anything, it's really just the idea, the visualizations that you're having, thinking about something going wrong or not
Mm-hmm.
being as planned or just what could happen, and then boom, you just shift by doing some action.
Yeah.
Take your mind off the fear and just put your focus on something.
No,
Now,
absolutely. Because I think so many people, like, they think about it, they think about it, they think about it, they think about it, and you got yourself like all kind of worked up before like you can handle a situation. Like I have a 2.5-year-old and a 2.5-month-old, and I don't know if you've ever watched like a baby, like when they're hungry or they're tired or something like that. They cry a little bit, they cry a little bit more, they cry a little bit more. And by the time like they've been crying for a while, they've worked themselves into such a tizzy, like it's going to take a little bit to get them calmed down. And it's the same way a lot of people still approach situations, right? It's you work yourself up, work yourself up, rather than like, okay, what can I do as an outlet to do something and kind of take my attention off of it?
yeah, and that's helpful with everything now that I think about it. Parenting, just business, work, yeah, everything that stresses you out, which is like a lot of things probably in life. Uh,
Yeah.
I wanted to talk to you a little bit about a lot of this podcast is getting past obstacles, overcoming obstacles, right? The
Hmm.
journey of self mastery, getting better, aligning mind, body, and spirit. So for you, since your success now, what was the biggest obstacle that was in your way from you getting to where you are now?
That's hard to say what my biggest was because I feel like there's so many different ones, right? Initially, like I was afraid of the camera. And I do a lot of camera work now, but initially I was afraid of the camera. So my podcast was audio only for 3 years. And so that was a barrier. Another barrier was I wasn't really great at talking to people in like an interview format. So I had to do more and more and more and more conversations. And in the beginning, I over prepared and it kind of made it more like an interrogation than an interview. So I had to kind of get better at balancing that out. So that's a barrier. The other barrier is like dude, I'm nobody. You know, I'm somebody from a small town in New Jersey. Nobody's ever heard of me. So like I had to really kind of work to get out there and get people to find me and know about me. And so that was being busy on social media. It was reaching out to the right people. It was consistently posting. So there's definitely a whole host of barriers, man, rather than just one big one. You know what I mean? I think some people are like, I had this giant barrier of like, some injury or some disability or something like that. For me, like it was a bunch of little ones, and you have to find out how to work around those things and get better at those things.
Yeah, and that brings a great point because I say that greatness isn't a great thing done. It's a bunch of little things done greatly,
Hmm.
and that's what it is. That's the little things. And if you look at any master of anything, anyone who's mastered any skill set, anybody extraordinary, what they do, they work on the little things and they keep making those little shifts to get better and better and improve each day.
Yeah.
And what was like the mindset shift for you? Because I can resonate with that who am I, like who's going to listen to me,
Yeah.
who am I to do this, or and some people who do any business entrepreneurial wise, if they haven't done it before, they might have that same thought.
Hmm.
Who am I to do this? Like, who's going to buy this? Who's going to listen to me, or whatever that was. So what was that shift that you had in your mindset to make you feel like you were enough to do this?
I don't know if it's an idea of not being enough. And I think the biggest thing I struggled with, and I think this is something a lot of people struggle with, is realizing the amount of effort it's going to take to get what you actually want done, right? A lot of people, being in sales taught me that because you have to make hundreds of phone calls to get anywhere. When I first started the podcast, like I reached out to hundreds of people to get the interviews I wanted. And I consistently followed up for years with some people. I had Robin Sharma on back in 2018, and they initially told me no. So I said, okay, can we book this 6 months out? So I scheduled it for 6 months out. So it was finding out like how could I do more and how could I take no's and make them yeses or make them maybes or things like that. So I think that's really the important thing for me was realizing how much effort it's going to take. It's going to take a lot more than you think it is. You're going to have to reach out to so many more people, follow up so much more often. So I've had this running spreadsheet for years where I track the last date someone was spoken to, what was said, who was the person I talked to on their team. So that way we can really continually follow up and do that. And it's allowed us to have a lot of the great guests we have. So a lot of it has been just the amount of action you have to take and the amount of consistent action you have to take has been the biggest thing I've learned.
Yeah, that's huge, man. I feel like it's always the underestimation of what is required
Yeah.
to be successful because you see a lot of the streamline of people's success. Like
Yeah.
even for you being a power lifter, somebody might look at a champion power lifter right now and think they don't realize like how many years and years and years of weightlifting and what they
Dude, I
do, what
wrestled
they eat.
103 my freshman year of high school. 103. I graduated wrestling 135, 140. And, I'm like around 200 pounds now. That's a lot of change in body. And I think a lot of people don't realize that, like you're saying.
Yeah, and they might not recognize like how much work someone puts in. Like
Yeah.
they might see The Rock and think he just, they don't realize he works out like 5 hours a day and has like incredible coaches and does all these things. Like and same thing with any success, entrepreneurial wise, podcast wise. Like I was discouraged looking at, Lewis Howes and stuff.
Yeah.
And I realized like this guy started, 12 years ago
Hmm.
and he's been consistent since then. So
Yes.
it's like someone I was talking to the other day said that you can't be jealous of somebody if you're not willing to do what they did to get what they got.
Hmm.
And I was just like, that's true. And I was just like, now I'm just a supporter of these great people.
Well, I think as well, it's also looking at like, like our journey is a book, right? And there's different chapters in it. I think a lot of times people will look at somebody who's on like chapter 52 when you're on chapter 2 and be like, damn, he's doing really well. And it's like, but they've been, like you said, they've been at it for a long time. So it's really hard to compare those different chapters of life to the current chapter you're in. So I think that's also part of it too, is number one, be a supporter, like you said, but also like realize we're in different phases of our life, different times of our life. So the comparison just isn't the same. And as people, we're all different anyway. Like we have our own quirks, our own skills, our own different things. So like, what may be difficult for you may be easy for someone else and vice versa. So I think that itself is also hard.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I wanted to get your take on this because being a successful entrepreneur, it's something that a lot of people aspire. So what is like your best advice for someone who is maybe they have a great idea, a business idea,
Hmm.
however they haven't started yet, or they're just new in the entrepreneurship and just feel like they're small?
So there's a book I read called So Good They Can't Ignore You by Cal Newport. And he talks about the idea of finding something you're good at and continually getting better at that and better at that and better at that until it becomes effortless. And that's where passion comes in. So that's the first thing I would say to somebody is check out that book because that book's a game changer. The other thing I would say is whatever you're building, build it alongside what you're already doing. If you have a job, great, keep your job and build that thing, continue to work on that thing because you make really bad decisions when that thing needs to pay the bills right now or, that thing needs to change what you're doing right now. So I would say whatever you're doing, build it along what you're already doing because you'll make better decisions. You'll be able to look at it 6 months from now, 6 weeks from now, six years from now, rather than just being in the now. Because when somebody's thinking about, okay, I got to pay an electric bill this week, it's different than, worrying about, okay, so I want to do these things in my business correctly so that it makes 10 times the amount of money I could be pulling out of it this week. So to me, that's the thing you should take a look at is how can I do what I'm doing or what I want to do alongside what I'm already doing, because you're going to be able to support it and you're going to be able to make better decisions. And then that's also like something to think about. I had somebody that I talked to that does real estate investing about this. And he goes, if you want to invest in real estate, they want to see your income. So if you don't have a job or if you don't have a career or something like that, they're never going to give you lending to get a house. So these are different things you have to think about, with whatever that side hustle you're building is.
Yeah, and that's a good. I think Robert Kiyosaki wrote a book like of several things to do before you quit your job, and it was just like keep your job.
Yeah.
What is-
You make better
So-
decisions, man. You do.
Yeah, because then you're not emotionally making these decisions based
Correct.
off desperation or like I need to sell this product, and then you come off like I need to sell this. It's
People can
more like,
feel that
yeah.
too, man. Like they feel like a number when you're on a sales call with somebody. You like need to make that money. They're like, whoa. So it's salespeople are even different when you're looking at it like that.
Yeah, and I notice a lot of like the successful people in like the real estate industry, they go into it with just that kind of certainty and confidence of I don't need this to go through. I'm here to help you.
Mhm.
And here is what I can provide as a product or service. And that
Yeah.
does make a huge shift of the psychology of the person because it's like, oh, it's not, they actually have something to offer here. This is what I have to gain. They're certain about it. And I think that certainty goes a long way. Because
Oh yeah.
when you're coming out of desperation, I feel like the certainty is more just nervousness.
Yes. No, absolutely, man. It really is a difference because it comes off as a confidence. And people can buy into confidence maybe when they don't even understand everything you're saying. So I think that's a really big deal is having that confidence.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I learned pretty recently. I always knew the importance of confidence, playing football and being an athlete and those things, and just in the military and everything. However, I'm noticing if you're extremely confident about something, like people will move and shift around you because of that. Like you
Yeah.
could literally go into a restaurant and be like confidently saying like we all have to leave right now, like something's going on, and people will start leaving. Like if you're certain about it, people are like, okay, and you might have like completely made everything up. And
It's fun. Are you one of those people that can look at that you can look at a situation and you make an idea about the situation and everybody's like, oh, he seems to know what he's doing, I'm going to do what he's doing? Like, are you one of those people?
Sometimes, yeah. Like, at this point, I'm more like I'm working on trusting other people because it's helping me do more, right? Delegating and just trusting people and just trusting judgment. So if somebody came in here and said something crazy, I'm like, all right, like what do we do? And it's really that confidence. And it's true, man. If you see it in like a doctor, and a doctor's like, I think this is what's going on, versus a doctor that's like, this is it, man. You need to cut this out, and this is what we have to change. I trust that guy. Even if
it's like, well, we could consider amputating your arm. I only got 2 arms, man. Let's think about this. Am I keeping it or am I not keeping it? You know what I mean? Like, that definitely would inspire confidence.
It will. And that goes with anything, man. And it just like, especially I'm learning in business. And if you want anyone to be influenced by what you're selling or what you're doing, or even like me now with just spreading the message of the podcast, I'm learning to practice that. Because now it's not like, oh, you should check this out. It's like, man, check this out because it's going to change your life.
Yes.
But like, check Jeremy Slate out because he just, he's been doing it for so long and he's killing it. Right. It's like you have that confidence, that energy. I know it just shifts everything around you. So that's something that I'm recently learning, man, because I've been so reserved for a long time. Like in the military, it was more just like be quiet and just do what I got to do. And now it's like that's not working as an entrepreneur.
Well, in most situations, not in all situations, one of my favorite sayings, and I don't even know who said it, but I picked it up somewhere, but it's the idea that competence breeds confidence, right? And it's not every time, but most people that are confident, I've met some people that are pretty confident and don't know what they're doing, but most of the time when people are confident, it's because they're competent at what they're doing. So I think that does, show that you know what you're doing, because I bought a generator yesterday because our power went out last week for like 4 days. It was horrible because I moved to the woods recently. Yeah, it's been great. But I bought a used generator off somebody, and the guy was an electrician. So I'm like, oh, electrician, this is going to be like a great generator. So because of that, I didn't ask any of the questions or anything like I would typically ask, and it was a great product. So I think when you can see that somebody is competent, it does change your decision-making or change how you look at a situation because you have confidence in their competence.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's another thing that is huge in building something and scaling something is getting people who are competent about where you're not competent at.
Yes.
And like being able to admit, like, I'm not competent in that area.
That is so hard, though.
Yeah,
that is so hard. It's such a barrier for people.
Yeah, it was for me, man, because I'm the smartest guy ever, right? I want to do it all. I could do it better than this person. And it's like, no, I can't. Like, what the hell do I know about bookkeeping or whatever? like, no, like you have to get your focus on what you're good at. And that's what I'm working on now is like, I don't need to be great at everything. It's just like focus on that thing that's going to help me to the next level, and everything else, I get support from other people. And I think that's huge in anything. Real estate investing. It's like you're not doing everything by yourself. Like you need people, right? To do, to help you with the financing, to help you with the accounting, to do the rehabs and do all those things. Like you need certain people. You're not going to be doing it all. And if you are, it's going to be not the most effective or efficient.
Well, and it's also knowing like who to ask too, right? Like I think that's really, really important as well. We just bought our first house about a month and a half ago. We've always rented before that. And we had found the realtor because that realtor actually helped me to sell my parents' house. My parents are, getting in their 60s. They're ready to retire. So I called one of the guys I know that's one of the top volume title guys in the state. So he does like titles. So I'm like, okay, a title guy is going to know who's a good realtor and who's a bad realtor, right? Because they see the back end of everybody's work. So I called the title guy I've known for like 20 years, and I'm like, who's the best realtor you know? And that's how I found a realtor that helped my parents get $20,000 more for their house than they should have. And then that same realtor helped us get a house that, honestly, because of all the people bidding against, we had 12 different people we bidded against. We had no business getting the house we got. So having the right realtor makes a big difference. And to me, I'm like, okay, who do you ask? Ask a title person, because they're going to know what the backside looks like.
That's where your education might come in handy, man. Because like, how many people would actually know to ask a title? Like, probably people don't even know what that is.
Yeah, it's important though, because title is one of the most important things in a real estate deal, and that's why, like, if you can find that person that's good at that, they're gonna know, like, oof, don't trust that guy. That guy does a great job, or that girl does a great job, or whatever it may be.
Yeah, so that's a huge point, man. Knowing who to ask, and just being courageous in asking the questions, because that's gonna, if you don't ask, you get no answers, and then you're trying to formulate your own answers based off whatever your experiences are. So, dude, I got another question to kind of wrap this up before we go into a little bit more about what you're doing now and what your future is looking like. And it's pretty simple, but it might be hard to answer. And it just, what does it mean to you to be a conqueror?
I'm going to tell you the first thing that came to my mind, and it really has nothing to do with any of this. So I was obsessed with Alexander the Great in grad school. So when I think conqueror, I think Alexander. But I guess when I look at it in terms of like what it could mean within the perspective of my life, I think to me, it's being in control in whatever situation you're in, and understanding when you need to be more causative in a situation, but also understanding when you need to be more effective in a certain situation, right? Like if somebody's going to be able to handle a situation better than you, it's understanding that and letting them do that. So to me, being a conqueror is able to be in control in some way, shape, or form in any situation that you're in.
Nah, I love that. And I should have thought about that, asking someone who has a degree in ancient history. Should have expected something like Alexander the Great. But I'm not talking about killing people and taking over countries.
My wife would not allow me to name our first child. She was a girl anyway, so it wouldn't have worked out. My wife would not allow me to name our first child Megas Alexandros, which is Alexander the Great in Greek. She's like, you're not doing that. That poor kid's going to be picked on like all the time.
Yeah, especially in New Jersey. You guys are brutal.
We're brutal, yeah.
But appreciate you, Jeremy, for taking your time out, man. I think it's the greatest gift you can give is your authentic self and your time. So thank you. Please tell us what your future is, what you're working on, where can people reach you and continue this conversation.
Yeah, so we're just working on growing our company, Command Your Brand. Team has grown a lot. We're up to 16 of us now, and we're really trying to make a big impact by helping people get on the right podcasts. I'm working on a book that's going to be out in the spring. It was supposed to be out this past spring, but a lot of life happened between then and now, and there was a thing called the pandemic too. So we have a book coming out next year, which I'm really, really excited about, called Extraordinary, and it's just based on a lot of what I've learned from nearly 1,000 podcast interviews with incredible human beings. So that's what I'm doing.
Awesome. And I'll have all your information linked in the details in the show notes. Check out Jeremy Slate podcast is awesome. He interviews some incredible humans. It will definitely shift your life if you're open to that, and just listen, take notes, and rewind this episode if you got value out of it. Thank you, Jeremy, for joining me today.
Hey, Musa, thank you so much for having me, man.
That is all for this episode. Thank you for tuning in. If you found any value in this episode, someone you know will also. Please share, subscribe, leave a rating and review so we can reach more people, have a farther ripple, and a larger impact. Stay grateful. I appreciate you. And remember, you are a conqueror.